Hi friends, welcome to this episode of International Trade. I'm Shrikant Kamath. For the next 40-45 minutes or so, I'm going to take you into an exciting journey of how India can turn around its economy in spite of COVID-19 pandemic and the economic distress and gloom that we have all around us. So I hope you like this video. Please put likes and subscribe by clicking on the bell icon. If more than 1,000 people like this video, I'll make 5 more videos on which are the African countries that India should invest. I will provide you more and more detailed information. So, so here we go, friends. So friends, in today's episode, I am going to tell you how in the current economic crisis which India is facing due to the COVID-19 pandemic, how India can come out of this crisis and how India can actually earn a fortune, make a fortune over the next 10 years or so if it invests in the right way and with the right mindset and strategy in the African continent. So this is what I am going to share with you. Uh, Please watch this video carefully because I'm also this is not just for the people who are interested in doing business, but this is also for policy makers in the government and for researchers as well as academicians in international trade law. This is a very important thing that I'm going to discuss today over the next 45 minutes or so. So friends, let's get started. We all, kind of distress that we actually have witnessed in the past 5 or 6 months, uh, wherever we are, whether in India or outside India. So, I mean, it's quite evident everywhere we have seen that establishments are closed, people are not able to travel in public transport, and many are working from home, though that is not possible for everyone, but still people are managing, workplaces are closed, yet businesses are somehow uh, trying to survive. But having said that, I mean, it has become very difficult. And today, what we are going to see is, first of all, at the beginning, we are going to see how, India's economy currently, what is the distress that we are facing. That is what we are going to look at. Next, we are going to see, in spite of its best efforts, how India's free trade agreements have not been able to bear the fruits that India was expecting, and what needs to be done, and how it needs to carefully now tread on the path of, uh, I mean, bilateral free trade agreements with new trade blocs and new countries. That also we will see in this video. And why I am saying that Africa can be a solution to India's cross-border trade distress, that also we will find out in very soon. And I have chosen 5 African countries. I feel that India should immediately start negotiating a trade deal with these 5 countries. Quite important, very diverse profile of these 5 African countries. So we will look at those as well. There is a new free trade area for the entire African subcontinent that has been negotiated by all the 55 African countries of the African Union, and that is called African Continental Free Trade Area. How that is going to be a watershed and how it is going to not only boost the economy of Africa and African nations, but also all other countries or trade blocs which are going to trade with that entire free trade area. So we will look at that as well in this video. And finally, we will look at what should be the steps that the government of India should take and to actually boost the confidence of businesses Indian businesses when they want to invest in Africa, and how even Indian government needs to be a partner in investments in Africa. That is also what we are going to see, and that is what I am going to discuss in today's video. And finally, we will see how India's approach should be different and needs to be different from uh, other countries which are already invested big time in Africa. So we need not copy them, yet we can actually uh, flourish and prosper. Uh, so that is also what I'm going to discuss in this video. And finally, some important points before we walk that path. What should be the primary things that should be borne in mind? So that is all that we have in this video. So let's get started without any delay. So we all know that the pandemic has caused a lot of distress. The pandemic has caused total disruption in the initial 3 months. Virtually everything, the businesses had come to, the entire economy had come to a standstill, so to say. And businesses also had closed down during the lockdown phase. And businesses are now gradually opening up. But it is not that the economic distress in India is due to the pandemic alone, because if we have to see, World Bank and other rating agencies were already downgrading or probably highlighting the sluggishness in India's economy even before the outbreak of COVID-19. So the economy was already sluggish. The growth that was expected was not going to happen in the current financial year, and on top of it, now we have this pandemic, the distress caused by the pandemic. So you can imagine what is the current situation that the country is facing as far as the economy is concerned. It is reported in some reports that I have come across, that almost 14 crore people, that is 140 million people, have lost their jobs in India. Believe it or not, this is really a mind-boggling number. And another 10 crores or so, about 100 million people have had to take pay cuts. So, you can imagine, if this is the situation at the ground, obviously there is not much purchasing power left with the public, and that is why the economy will gradually stutter. Almost 50% of households have reported an income drop. So this is the kind of situation on the ground, and it is obvious that people will only buy essentials and not really care to buy luxury items, and that is how, if there is less and less demand, obviously the economy slows down and the growth comes to a standstill. So as we see the growth, there will be a degrowth, or probably as compared to last year, we are going to see a shrinking of the GDP by 6%, which is very huge if we are going to consider the GDP of India. That in itself is ranking in the top 3 amongst the world and in the world, and if that is going to shrink by 6%, you can imagine what kind of a number that we are talking about. And businesses are not investing because there is so much of uncertainty. Nobody knows for sure that when we will get back to our normal life. So people don't really know, and that is why they are holding their horses. Nobody wants to commit any investment except for some things which were already under discussion and which were already, deals were getting negotiated prior to the outbreak of the epidemic, and probably those deals are getting closed, but other than that, investments are not really happening big time. So that again causes lot of stagnation and sluggishness in the economy. Exports have reduced because other countries have also not opened up. They are all opening up gradually, and job rich sectors like hospitality industry, travel industry, media and entertainment industry. These are all closed, not yet open, or probably very on a minuscule scale as compared to the normal. So, with all this reduced activity, obviously we are going to see a shrinkage of GDP. Now, coming to the international trade, in June 2020, we have seen almost 48% contraction in our imports, and also the exports have fallen by about 12.4%. So, although in that month, in the month of July, it was reported that India has a trade surplus, but actually that is not something which is a cause for cheer, because it clearly shows that business activity is almost uh, working at half its pace. And if global demand and disruptions in supply chain are going to be the norm for the next 3 months or 6 months, it is very obvious that this kind of a gloom can spill over in financial year, uh, I mean the next fiscal year as well, from the current financial year 2021. So that is the kind of situation at the ground in terms of the economic distress. Now, people were thinking that probably India's free trade agreements will actually help in India's bad times, or probably will boost the economy. But even on free trade agreements, there is nothing to cheer about. India has not been really happy with the way trade has, I mean, uh, gone about after India has executed, negotiated some free trade agreements in the past decade or so. So largely in most of the free trade agreements, India's trade deficit with those partner countries or trade blocs has increased, and it has not come down. And even if we look at, I mean, the customs tariff, typically we have 99 chapters distributed under 21 sections. Out of these 21 sections, India has experienced a worsening trade deficit or trade balance with these partner countries in 13 out of 21 sections. So you can imagine why India will feel happy about free trade agreements. The experience has not been anything great. And typically in overseas markets, India doesn't compete with countries like China on price or price levels, because I mean, what we believe is probably we can give a better quality and a reliable service to the customer, and that is why price sensitive customers will go to probably other countries like China first, and then come try to buy Indian products, or probably people who are quality conscious will buy Indian products. So that will happen when there is a uh, good demand in the market. But with the current COVID situation, you can imagine market is sluggish worldwide. So when there is low demand and people don't want to really spend much, so price is one of the factors where Indian goods will be a second choice perhaps in some markets. And that is why even there in the markets where we have a free trade agreements, Indian goods have not been able to penetrate the markets to the extent desired. That again is a cause for distress for the government on free trade agreements. And as far as our services are concerned, as we all know, our services are probably, I mean, something to really feel good about, because India has really carved a niche for its information technology services, financial services, banking. So these kind of services also, the trading partner countries have not been really welcoming our services or our businesses for in their markets. So we have not been able to get market access for our services in those countries, trading partner countries. And that is again a problem which India hasn't been able to resolve on free trade agreements negotiations. So if we have seen, I mean, that what data we have, it's barely 25% utilization is the rate for any free trade agreement. So Indian businesses, not more than 25% of our businesses are really interested in this free trade, making the most of these free trade agreements. So either they do not know much, they don't have much information on how to make the best use of free trade agreements, or because there are delays, there is administrative cost involved, and now recently the government has in fact made amendments in the Customs Act to give powers to the custom officer to demand evidence of origin as well as value addition. So with these kind of procedural aspects which actually pile up the costs, not many businesses are really interested in going for free trade agreements, and they consider it as non-tariff barriers. And that is why there is underutilization of free trade agreements from India's side as well. So it is not that just the partner country is responsible for not giving us market access, but Indian businesses also are a little reluctant to go that path. And as far as investments in the partner country is concerned, there are not many Indian investors who find it a conducive environment to invest in the partner country for these reasons, because of lack of market access or because of lack of information. So these are challenges that India has faced in free trade agreements, and that is why recent news reports, if you would have read, that India has, wants to renegotiate some free trade agreements, review its free trade agreements, and now its priorities are very clear when negotiating new free trade agreements, because of all these experiences that India has had in the past 10 or 15 years. So does it mean that India doesn't negotiate any free trade agreements anymore? Uh, it is That is not the case, because India also has some latent strengths. Indian businesses, whether it is goods or services. So and India is no longer a, country with a large number of unskilled labor employed in its industries. That is not the case. We all know how successful India's service industry is, which employs the world's best skilled people, software engineers, software programmers. So on the value chain, or probably on the value curve, India has moved up, and it's no longer really, even businesses are also not interested in labor intensive and uh, where actually you don't need skilled labor. uh, People are not really interested in those kind of industry or businesses anymore. So people want to provide value driven products, goods and services, and for which uh, high skills are necessary, and high skills are fairly available in the country. So that is why India has moved up the value chain. And the new age industry, if we can see around us, they are more in automotive sector, telecommunications, construction, information technology, of course, uh, finance and banking for that matter. We have the best talent in finance and banking, and healthcare and pharma. In fact, hospital chains, you can healthcare chains, you can clearly see mushrooming across tier 1, tier 2 cities. Food processing, India is actually world's largest food basket, if we are aware, and food processing is also flourishing in India now. And so the traditional industries of mineral extraction, like iron ore extraction and other metals, and oil extraction or oil refining, and textiles, for which India has been well known for decades, 4 or 5 decades. In fact, those industries are also there, but no longer are they the preferred choice of businesses here. But having said that, uh, even those traditional industries are also doing well because they too have invested in technology, and power projects have come up across the country, and also renewable energy is one area where India has invested big time. Skill development across various skills, technology, and infrastructure development, these have been the focus for the past decade or so in India, and that is why India has moved up the value chain, as I mentioned. But at the same time, agriculture research, pharmaceuticals, information technology, which were booming at the turn of the millennium, they are also growing exponentially. So India is doing well, but India has moved up the value chain, and that is why on the international trade front, these are the kind of industries which will want to look at prospects for them in overseas markets. And of course, as far as education is concerned, we all know that every Indian city has so many schools, colleges, universities, and they are mushrooming even in tier 3 cities now. Tier 1 and tier 2 are already, I would say, not saturated, but definitely they can stake their claim to a very high number of educational institutions. So clearly, India's priority now is very clear that their services should get market access, their value-added goods should get market access, and people should be allowed to move freely in the partner country, trading partner country, as far as employment is concerned, or for doing business is concerned, or for residence is concerned. Residence may not be so much of a priority, but at least there should be free movement of people for employment and business purposes in the trading trading block or country. And businesses who want to invest in the overseas market, they want to ensure that their intellectual property is safeguarded, it is secure, and their investments, they are able to repatriate the profits, or at least ensure security of their investments, and by virtue of a stable regime and a stable tax regime as well as tax climate. So these are the kind of areas which India wants to now focus in its prospective free trade agreements. So that brings us to the question as to why Africa? Why should India sign a trade deal with Africa? So if you see on this slide, there are a few pictures. So on the left, the pictures suggest that there was an Indo-Africa summit in 2015. So friends, that is again a watershed event which happened in 2015, and that has set the agenda for Indo-African trade relations. And you can see our honorable Prime Minister greeting the African delegates, and during that summit. So that event or that summit set up the vision for India's trade with the African continent. And on your right, you can see the picture of a African continental free trade area that has been created. It is a historic event which happened in March 2018 in Rwanda, Kigali, which is the capital of Rwanda. And in that historic event, 44 African countries came together to sign the document which created the African Continental Free Trade Area. And eventually, it is now signed by all 55 countries of the African Union. And from 1st of January, it is expected, 1st of January 2021, it was actually going to be coming in force from 1st of July 2020. But now, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, this has been postponed and likely to commence the enforcement or the uh, free trade area will come into effect from 1st of January 2021. So this is going to create a historic, unprecedented common market across the entire Africa as a continent. So how we have one common market after GST in India, exactly the same way 55 countries are going to function, like just we have 30 states in India. That way it is going to be just like one country in Africa, and eventually the objective is to have one African passport for all the African citizens of any country in Africa. So that is the goal. Common market is the goal, so that people can move from one country to another country without requiring a passport. And of course the beginning of this African continental free trade area will be by way of having one customs union. So customs union means that there will be no separate customs tariff for each country. If you import goods in one country, the goods can move freely without again getting subjected to customs duty in any other country. So that is the customs union which has been formed. And at customs union, how many items will be put for, in terms of the freely tradable without any customs duties between these African countries is currently getting negotiated. But the conditions of which have been signed by all countries clearly specify that 90% of the tariff lines will be duty free. So countries will have to release 90% of their goods for free customs duty, no zero customs duty between each other. So intra-African trade will be duty free for 90% of the tariff lines. So that is really a watershed event which happened in March 2018, and from 30th of May 2019 the African free trade area, continental free trade area, is already in force. And now effectively for the world, 1st of January 2021 is when actually they can see this being put into operations. So let us look at India's trade with Africa. It has not been something really great in terms of Africa doesn't feature in the top 5 or top 10 countries, or probably top 10 territories with which India trades in terms of imports and exports. But nevertheless, about 5% or 5% of India's exports are to Africa, and about 6% of India's imports are from Africa. I can tell you that much. So actually, even if the size is small, it clearly establishes that there is a huge potential to increase exports and imports with Africa. And Africa also, right now, India is definitely not at the top of its list of countries with which African countries are trading. But nevertheless, after China, the European Union and the United States, India does figure in its list of countries. It comes fourth, ranks fourth, but India is barely 10% of, as far as the trade size is concerned, India is barely 10% of China. In terms of China's investments in Africa are concerned, China is virtually more than 3/4 of Africa. China has a presence, whereas India is present in more or less only English speaking African countries like Nigeria, Tanzania, Kenya, South Africa, Botswana. These are the countries India is more engaged in cross-border trade as far as African continent is concerned. And if you look at China, China is more into kind of some more of strategic investments in the African continent. China will focus more on building roads and transportation, power generation, telecommunications. This is typically China's focus and preference, whereas India's focus and preference has been agriculture, water infrastructure, electrification, education. These are how India has so far focused on Africa. India's intention is to look after African countries like younger brother or sister and try to develop them, whereas China's approach has been clearly market oriented. So let us look at uh, Indo-African trade. Let us see what does India's export basket look like. So India exports petroleum products, pharma products, medicines, commercial vehicles, food preparations, textile yarn and related products, specialized machinery, iron and steel, electrical machinery and apparatus, and metal items, organic chemicals. So these are the kind of goods that are exported. So not much of services that we see here to Africa. So petroleum and petroleum products, about 15% of total exports. So let me tell you that India's exports are about 25 billion US dollars to Africa, and imports are about 35 billion US dollars. So of that, about 15.3% is petroleum products, largely to Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, these countries. Pharma products to virtually entire North Africa, Central Africa. Then commercial vehicles, food preparations to many least developed countries, textile yarn again to many, to Kenya, Tanzania, and other Central African countries. So this is the kind of pie that we are looking at as far as our export basket is concerned, and it's not something very big size wise. So there is a lot of potential, and there are not too many countries to which India exports. So out of, let's say, 55 countries in Africa, India doesn't export beyond about 18 or 20 countries. So another 35 countries, India has virtually no export trade. So which means it is very clear that, and we will see that in the next couple of slides, which are the top 20 countries with which India uh, trades. And this is barely total size of the trade is 60 billion US dollars, import and export put together. Now let's look at India's import basket from Africa. Again, petroleum and petroleum products form the largest size, almost 42% of total imports from Africa are of petroleum and petroleum products, largely from Nigeria and Algeria, and coal, coke, and briquettes, gas. So largely, if you see, this is, uh, I mean, basic resources, raw materials, not too many finished products. In fact, rough diamonds, gold, vegetables and fruits. So there is not much processed or finished goods that you can see, except maybe power generating machinery and equipment. So that stands out. But otherwise, most of the products are all raw materials or basic resources for production. So which is very clear that, I mean, currently only raw materials are being imported from Africa, and which again brings us to the point that India can actually set up businesses in Africa for finished goods manufacture, and those companies can very well supply to African countries also and export it back to India, and we will have a much larger size as far as the basket of import and export is concerned. So if we are looking at the countries right now, we see these are the top 20 countries, starting from Nigeria, South Africa. So Nigeria, if we see, has the largest of the total share of trade with African countries as far as India is concerned. So Nigeria's share is, so this is in million US dollars. So 12,304 million US dollars is the size of our trade with Nigeria, largely petroleum products. And at number 2 is South Africa, then comes Ghana, and then comes Egypt, Tanzania, Mozambique, Algeria also ranks about number 7, but the trade is not much. If you look at it, the size is barely 2000 million US dollars. And then the rest of the countries, Kenya, Botswana, Morocco, Sudan, Senegal, and the others are barely not even able to touch 1,000 million US dollars. So that is the basket as far as the countries are concerned, African countries trading with India. So with this kind of a picture, how do you think that Africa can still rejuvenate India's economy, which has already come down by 20% in these past 5 months from April to August as compared to the last year, previous year? And World Bank has already said that stringent measures to restrict spread of virus will curtail short-term activity and result in contraction of the economy. This the World Bank has stated in a press release in July 20. So it is a recent press release, not a prediction. So based on data. So which is clear that, I mean, the economy is, as I mentioned earlier, really wants a shot in the arm, a boost, and that is why. And look at the state of the small and medium sized enterprises, MSMEs as we call them in India, micro, small, medium enterprises. MSMEs are really struggling for funds, for business, for working capital finance, and demand is low. So even if they produce, there are barely any buyers, and labor is also not available because migrant laborers have moved back to their hometowns during the lockdown or after the lockdown, and not many have returned back. So these are all kinds of struggles that small and medium companies or businesses in India are currently undergoing. So if India wants to really look at Africa in a very serious way, and if Africa has to be the answer to India's economic woes, current woes post the pandemic, then the priority should be public health as much as in India, I mean as in Africa, and public health and economic priorities have to be need to be balanced. So this is something easier said than done, and that is why the current free trade agreements have not come to India's rescue. But with this kind of an experience, India can now sit and try to negotiate trade deals. So I mentioned that the African Continental Free Trade Area has already come into existence. So India can start negotiations with the African Union, which can negotiate on behalf of all the African countries. So India can negotiate, but meanwhile India needs to quickly enter into trade deals with at least 4 or 5 African countries and quickly establish a more conspicuous presence, industrial presence in Africa. So I am going to tell you which should be countries with which India should be negotiating trade deals very fast. But before that, let me tell you that this is the kind of position or situation Indian businesses are going to find themselves in the country. Tax rates are going to be increased because India's economy, I mean, with the kind of economic packages that have been announced, obviously the government, whether it is the federal government or whether it is the state governments of different states in India, they are going to really want to mobilize revenue, and the easiest way of mobilizing revenue is always to increase tax rates or to make uh, tax scrutiny more stringent. So this is going to cause a lot of heartburn and hardship probably to businesses here. So people are obviously, people may not want to at this juncture invest more and more. So they will want to invest, but businesses which are flush with funds will want to invest elsewhere. So that is why I am saying that Africa is the answer, and rightly so. So that is why I am listing five countries I believe where India can definitely make inroads. India has not been so conspicuously present in these countries. Algeria tops the my list of countries. First comes Algeria. Algeria is, if you can see here on the African map, Algeria, which is by far geographically the largest area in Africa. It's the largest country in Africa. It is at the northernmost end of Africa, and it is the gateway to Europe in that sense, because it is lining the Mediterranean Sea. So Algeria's ports are all in the Mediterranean Sea. So transporting merchandise to Europe, I think the Algeria is the best answer or best solution. So one is trade with Europe if you have a presence in Algeria, and Algeria also actually helps you transport goods, merchandise to northern Africa very smoothly and easily. Algeria has vast oil and gas reserves. Algeria is among the top five producers of oil and gas in Africa. So, Indian oil and gas companies, public sector and private sector, can think of establishing a presence in Algeria. Fortunately, Algeria has now a stable regime. The regime changed last year, and apparently, the new regime has the support of the majority of Algerian people. And Algeria has also come out with a new investment code in 2016, and as per that investment code, certain industries, if you make investments, you get tax benefits, you can repatriate funds back to your country. So the of course there are some limitations though. Incorporating a company in Algeria requires you to have a local partner. Someone resident in Algeria should have 51% equity in the company. So that is a challenge, but I see that as a positive thing, that you have someone from Algeria who can share your risk of business. As far as threat of terrorism is concerned, many businesses apprehend that the threat of terrorism in Algeria is real. I do agree with them, but the fact is that for the past 5 years or so, there has not been any untoward event as far as businesses are concerned in Algeria. Government has ensured, government of Algeria, that businesses do not suffer. Although neighboring countries like Libya have had more very frequent terrorist attacks and activities, so the apprehension arises from that fact. But nevertheless, so far it has been very peaceful in Algeria, and businesses have life has been as usual for businesses in Algeria. So I think it's a good beginning that the Indian government can make on behalf of the Indian industry by negotiating a free trade deal with Algeria. And if there are no free trade zones or special economic zones, then the free trade deal can actually incorporate establishment of such zones for Indian businesses and investments. And actually, Algeria may make an exception even for Indian businesses wanting to invest by allowing them more than 50% equity in entities incorporated in Algeria. So all that is something which needs to be discussed and negotiated across the table. But a beginning needs to be made, and Algeria is as I mentioned, port infrastructure wise, everything is fairly conducive to business. Next on my list is Botswana. Botswana is a small landlocked country in the, if you can see the map there of Africa, it is on the northern side of South Africa, and it is a landlocked country. It doesn't have any port of its own, so goods have to be shipped to other countries, and I mean it has to be transported through either South Africa or Zimbabwe or Mozambique. So that is how you take goods into Botswana or out of Botswana. But even if it is a landlocked country, Botswana is one of the safest and the strongest economy in Africa, and the regime there also, political regime, has been very stable and strong. Botswana is very safe in terms of the safety of businesses and enterprises and people. Botswana is considered to be one of the safest regions in Africa. India is already trading with Botswana, importing rough diamonds from Botswana. So 90% of Botswana's trade comprises of export of diamonds. The rest of the 10% is export of copper, nickel, machinery and electrical equipment and other items, even gold. But that is barely 10% of Botswana's trade. But as I mentioned, Botswana has a very good potential for Indian businesses to be set up there, and industrial activity can increase, and Botswana has a conducive climate for investments, to attract investments, and India should quickly negotiate a trade deal with Botswana, and businesses should try and maybe initially get into joint ventures with the existing companies, and then maybe set up their own. But nevertheless, it is a good option. Next on my list is Gabon. Gabon is, I think very little is known about Gabon in India here, but Gabon is again a strategically very good location. If you see, it is on the western coast of the African continent, and Gabon again has a couple of very good ports from where goods can be transported to Europe and to the United States. So, and Gabon is sparsely populated, very rich in natural resources. In fact, natural resources are in abundance, and a very safe and stable regime there. Although on the corruption rankings, Gabon ranks a bit low, but nevertheless, Gabon has introduced a new special economic zone in closer to its capital Libreville, and initially that special economic zone was more for timber and wood products, but now it has been extended to other products also. Gabon got its independence from France in 1960, and it's a French speaking country though, just like Algeria. But the point is that and China has a very strong presence in Gabon. So if China can establish a strong presence in a French speaking country, I am sure India can definitely also establish a strong presence. So again, India should very quickly enter into a trade deal with Gabon, and Indian businesses should think of investing big time in the country. Next on the list is Mauritius. The name Mauritius is very familiar to Indian companies. There are many Indian companies whose holding companies are already incorporated in Mauritius. Mauritius has been very well known in India and generally in the world to be a haven for investment companies, and till last year Mauritius was also a preferred choice for company incorporation for avoiding taxation in India for holding companies, and there were allegations or probably apprehensions of round tripping where Indian companies used to incorporate and then bring investments back into India from Mauritius. So that loophole has been plugged last year, and but nevertheless, for investing in African companies, Mauritius is still a very lucrative destination. Mauritius enjoys tax treaties with more than 50 countries. Mauritius was initially known as more for sugarcane production and exporter of sugarcane, and in the past 50 years, Mauritius has come a long way, and now it has even set up establishments for information technology. And earlier it only Port Louis was a city which was well known or considered developed, but now Mauritius has developed many other cities. Although Mauritius is very small, if you can see on the map there, so this is Mauritius, and is very minuscule or small as compared to the continent, but nevertheless it is closer to India. India is somewhere here. So in fact, and it is a gateway to Africa, one can consider, for taking the investment into Africa. And companies incorporated in Mauritius can do business here anywhere in Africa with now the new African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So Mauritius has increased the use of renewable energy. It encourages use of renewable energy. It has developed smart cities, and it is upgrading its infrastructure and modernizing it, and including public transport. So all this augurs well. India can be a partner in this augmentation of infrastructure and public transport, and India can also consider Mauritius to be a gateway for investments in Africa. And Mauritius has always been a great friend of India. There is a large Indian population there in Mauritius who have settled down largely from Bihar and northern India. So, in that sense, people can consider Mauritius as second home as far as Indian businesses are concerned. And then finally, in the list of companies, in the list of countries, I have a very small, least developed country, Rwanda, as my choice. Although Rwanda is an LDC, the per capita GDP of the country is not more than 1,000 US dollars. And let me tell you, the first four countries that I mentioned to you, Algeria, Botswana, Gabon, and Mauritius. Let me share with you one fact which you may not be aware of. All these four countries, the GDP per capita is more than India's GDP per capita. So if India's GDP per capita is US dollars 2,300 thereabouts, all these countries that I spoke mentioned. So Algeria is about somewhere about 7,000. I'm sorry, 5,000 US dollars. Gabon is about 7,000 US dollars. Botswana is again about 7,500, and Mauritius is about 14,000 US dollars. So they are all middle or high income, high middle income countries as compared to India, which is a low middle income country. So that is a reflection of that. So it is, as far as purchasing power is concerned, these countries definitely have more purchasing power if we are looking at GDP per capita. Although the sheer GDP is much larger for India, but GDP per capita of these four countries is much more than India's. Only Rwanda's GDP per capita is less than 1,000, and but Rwanda is very has a great reputation for a very minimum corruption in the country, and on the integrity index it figures almost at the top. And recently it has initiated policy reforms. The investment climate is very friendly to attract foreign investments, and as far as permits are concerned, construction permits, electricity cable laying permits, these kind of permits have been fast tracked. So, and exporters also have been encouraged to, the turnaround time for customs clearance has improved. Although it is a landlocked country and closer to the eastern coast of Africa, uh, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, these are the countries uh, which are Rwanda's neighbors on the east. And Rwanda's investment code includes equal treatment between foreigners and nationals with regard to repatriation of funds, compensation against expropriation. So you can visualize that it is very business friendly and even getting even more business friendly. So with this African continental free trade area, Rwanda is again going to become very attractive for investment. So these are the five countries that I believe India should quickly move for negotiating trade deals. Although now the African continental free trade area has come into force and trading will become effective from 1st of January 2021. It is expected to commence. But currently, Africa has the entire African continent has many free trade agreements. So different regions like the Eastern African countries have one free trade agreement. The Western African countries will have another free trade agreement. Northern African countries have one more free trade agreement. So these are the current free trade agreements. Although, as far as uh, tariffs are concerned, they are still struggling. Barely 10-15% of tariff lines have been enjoying duty free status in any of these countries, any of these agreements. So people have raised questions how, if this has been a challenge for so many years, how will the African countries negotiate 90% of the tariff lines, how will they become duty free under African continental free trade area? Of course, that is for future, but right now let us look at the free trade agreements. So if we see African continental free trade area now, that is considered to be a giant leap. And let's see what exactly is the African continental free trade area. So it has, I mean, comprises of three framework documents. The first is establishment of the first document talks about establishment of the continental free trade area. So that is the vision of that free trade area is to have one common market, single liberalized market for goods and services, facilitation of movement of persons, and deeper economic integration amongst African countries. That is the vision. So that is the vision document. And within this vision document, you also have the trade facilitation and a customs union incorporated within that. So the customs union also has been established by virtue of this document, this agreement. And within that customs union of 55 countries, so there will be one customs tariff for any import and export to or from Africa. It will be governed by one customs tariff. So once customs duties are paid on any goods brought into any country in Africa, they will not suffer customs duty again if they travel from one African country to another African country. So that is all under this first document. Then we have a protocol on trade in goods. So that is something like your GATT 94 agreement under the WTO. So it is on similar lines. Then you have protocol on trade in services. So at the moment this protocol is fairly blank. They are still negotiating it. Trade in services is being negotiated in the phase 2. Trade in goods is more or less all finalized. Uh, the operational phase of the free trade agreement was launched on 7th of July, and operational instruments are the following, which is the rules of origin are in place, and the negotiating forum, how to negotiate in terms of tariff lines, which tariff lines to be made duty free. All this has, the online forum has been finalized, and which are the non-tariff barriers which will be eliminated after monitoring, that is also agreed. A digital payment system has been established. This is something wonderful. And there is a overarching African trade observatory. So there will be a observing authority which will observe the trade pattern or the trade behavior of all African countries under the African Continental Free Trade Area. So that is the framework at this moment. So the pillars are, these are the 5 pillars of the agreement or the Continental Free Trade Area, that you have to invest, you have to produce, you have to facilitate trade, you have to build trade related infrastructure, and you have to ensure that for the imports there is a safeguard of intellectual property and investments are safeguarded, so that there is more and more investment in the continent. So these are the 5 pillars. It's a wonderful depiction of the 5 principles on which this Continental Free Trade Area has been based on. And what are the potential advantages for businesses because of this African Continental Free Trade Area? What will businesses get? Obviously the economies of scale, because now you have one Africa, and you will have access to cheaper raw materials and intermediates. Your value chains will be now completely overhauled and improvised, and the value chain can now get integrated into the global value chain. So you need not, if something is available in abundance in Africa, you need not circumvent or route it through some other third country. You can now actually, through this free trade agreement, you can negotiate a deal and directly get a have a presence in Africa, and then supply from there to anywhere in the world. So integration, that is how you integrate into the global value chain. And of course this will help African economies transform, and eventually technology and knowledge is also something which currently they are deprived of. They will be the beneficiaries of that, and capital will flow not just to a certain few countries in Africa, but virtually the entire African, because a sizable territory in Africa is still considered underdeveloped or least developed. So the focus is to develop those territories, and that will happen when capital flows in. A labor market which will be skilled and which can travel from one African country to another. So that is the objective, and that is the future. So this is the framework depicted pictorially. Indians per se, Indian businesses have had apprehensions about investing in Africa, and businesses have always believed that there are 6 areas where these challenges lie. One is the political regime in African countries has never been stable. Today you find one regime, tomorrow there is a military coup, and next day there is another new regime. So that is how African countries have, that is how the impression the outside world has about African countries. So political stability, safety and security, armed conflict has been very common in Africa, so people are worried about that as well. So that is the foremost concern. The other concern is about challenges for starting a business and doing business, transportation, logistics, and skilled labor, in fact, availability of labor. These are real time challenges that people have faced and they apprehend that could be the challenge. So, while businesses may be invited with open arms, but the fact is that on the ground these challenges could be there. Power supply, availability of power and energy, electricity could be again a challenge. Even energy for that matter, coal or any other source of energy, and banking, availability of finance. Uh, this is again something which people believe that there are not too many banks operating in the rural parts of Africa or probably the interiors, and that is where I mean people are apprehensive about going and investing in the deeper regions of Africa. And certain countries have are very well known to have very high rate of taxes and duties. So these are the apprehensions, and of course cross border trade has not been great. And from a World Bank perspective, this is the graphic of how I mean for setting up the business. So these are the challenges of setting up the business and doing business on a daily basis. So these are the day-to-day activities where Indian businesses are apprehending challenges. As far as armed conflict is concerned, I think the days are gone when there was armed conflict in maybe half of the continent. Now it is restricted to very small parts of a couple of countries, and not too many countries are actually experiencing any armed conflict. As far as terrorism is concerned, there are two or three countries which are still victims or which are facing serious terrorism related incidents and issues. But otherwise, as far as armed conflicts are concerned, I think they are the thing of the past. Although there is documented evidence that there are some disturbances in these countries. South Sudan, for that matter, has had a peace deal, and Ethiopia has had a peace deal. Central African Republic has had a peace deal. So all these have had peace agreements in the past 1 year or past couple of years. And although people say that the peace is fragile and violence may erupt any moment, armed conflict may, but so far things are fairly under control, and I believe this negotiation of the African continental free trade area, I'm sure when all 55 African nations have signed the framework agreement, I believe the intention is to eliminate conflict sooner than later. As far as Indian businesses are concerned, their apprehensions on the challenges, I think they should have a long term approach in their mind. They should focus on training the natives. So while Indian labor can migrate to Africa initially, because there will be a lot of skilled labor required which may not be available initially in Africa, but gradually you will have to train the natives, the local population there, and educate them. So provide for their education, their basic needs. So that is how you will, if you have an all-encompassing approach, unlike the Chinese. The Chinese have faced some opposition in many African countries for the primary reasons that they have had a very commercial driven approach of exploiting the natural resources, extracting the natural resources for their benefit, and not really helping the local population there in their development. So that has been the cause of anger there in some countries. But India need not worry, because India has always, as I mentioned earlier, India has had an approach of, I mean, developing the population, developing the road infrastructure, electrification, telecommunication lines. This is how India has actually, if you see from 2015 to 2020, India has spent about 1 billion US dollars as aid on Africa under the program which I mentioned under the Indo-African Summit. 1 billion US dollars was committed, and it has been spent on this kind of aid. And then there is one agency called ITEC, and that ITEC is engaged with many African countries for these kind of programs for development. So, I mean, so India has already taken the right path, the right approach, and it is not a mercantilist approach, unlike China, and that is why I believe African countries will welcome Indian businesses. And as far as challenges are concerned, Indian businesses need not worry if they take the people, and if with the support of the Indian government, those challenges can be surmounted. But obviously, a long-term approach is to be borne in mind, and not a short-term approach for, I mean, generating profits. There is already a fair amount of Indian population present in African countries. Indian businesses should take heart and should get in touch with them, involve them, help, take their help, and build on new investments in countries like Botswana and Rwanda. And as I said, India's approach should be of a shareholder in Africa's development and not just a trading partner. So if it is a shareholder, then I'm sure, I mean, with Africa's development, the shareholder will also prosper, flourish. Uh, and the shareholder, any shareholder in development will obviously want to invest, and we need to invest in Africa's education, we need to invest in Africa's water infrastructure, energy infrastructure, road development. We need to be partners in all those as well, and that is how the challenges can be addressed. Now the most interesting part is, how can government help apart from negotiating a trade deal for the Indian businesses and talking to various governments of various African countries. What else can the Indian government do for Indian businesses? So Indian businesses would expect the government of India also to have its skin in the game, and I believe that is quite fair expectation. And that is why Indian government also needs to be an investor in the new businesses that will be set up or established in Africa by Indian businesses. So they need to buy equity in those businesses, and that equity can be bought by having uh, incorporating a sovereign wealth fund. There is already a wealth fund incorporated. It's called National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, and this is the right now the corpus is about 2 billion US dollars. And in fact, that wealth fund was incorporated for infrastructure development, strategic investments in India. So it was more to look within than outside. So either an African wealth fund for Africa can be carved out of this NIIF, or a new sovereign wealth fund needs to be incorporated, and for dedicated investments in Africa, the government can buy equity instruments in foreign currency, and if the businesses make profits, then eventually these foreign currency instruments will reap a bonanza for the government, for the economy. India's currency will strengthen, and eventually, I mean, the economy will get a big boost. So the more the government invests through this sovereign fund, the chances of India's economy getting a boost will be much higher. So, for example, now if you see, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority has invested in India's sovereign fund. So if foreign funds are investing in India's sovereign fund, India should have its own sovereign fund and invest along with the Indian businesses, Indian entrepreneurs in overseas businesses. And that is how the economy will grow, or economy will in fact get the kind of boost it right now requires. So this is more or less the expectation from the government, not just to create a policy framework and not just to negotiate trade deals with countries, but actually also invest alongside the Indian businesses from its wealth, sovereign wealth fund. It needs to carve out a strategic investment for the African continent for business purposes, and invest in foreign equity instruments, foreign currency equity instruments. And that is how, from a long term perspective, the economy will get a boost. Now, to if someone says that if you look at Africa, what will happen to India's Make in India program? So, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this discussion, Make in India is not just for, not just probably a slogan, but it's a philosophy, it's a way of life now for Indian businesses. So, we are trying to uh, become as independent as possible in terms of raw materials, in terms of finished goods, in terms of intermediates, in terms of services. But the fact of the matter is that India has moved up the value chain. There are some basic goods and services which can be produced in other countries by Indian businesses and entrepreneurs. They need not be in India, and that will not really affect the economy or the market here. So in terms of so definitely those goods and services production can move out of the country, and that will not really jeopardize the Make in India program. The Make in India program is for more value driven goods and services. Like for example, we now have the Apple iPhones getting manufactured in the country, so that is a value driven product. So we have moved to that stage now, even in terms of services, telecommunication, banking. We have moved to those kind of services, and basic software development can actually be moved to smaller countries in Africa, and you can actually develop the skills of African natives there. Initially, people just like software engineers move to US or the European Union. Similarly, they can be relocated to African countries, and they can actually develop the workforce over there of the African natives. So, in that sense, Make in India will not get conflicted. The biggest advantage that Africa has is in terms of logistics, location. Africa can be the second India in the sense that actually proximity to the United States and Europe is far better from Africa. So, goods and services which have to be supplied on priority can actually move from the African continent to United States and the European Union. And so, from a logistics perspective, certain businesses can move to the African continent. So we have seen that it is not just negotiating a trade deal and in fact uh, creating a policy framework are not just the two things that the Indian government is expected to do, but also be a partner in investments by way of actual investments. And as far as Africa is concerned, the Indian government's stand, I think, is very clear that it is more like uh, I mean, trying to protect a younger brother or a younger sister. So African countries are well aware of India's approach. So in that sense, that approach or that image or that impression about Indian government, which is there in African countries, I think the Indian government should use it to its advantage, that goodwill, and help broker a very favorable trade deal with individual countries till such time that the African continental free trade area is actually, I mean, effective and in force. But till such time, I think the individual trade deals should be negotiated very effectively, so that investments, intellectual property rights, and I mean, are all safeguarded. The taxation is not very stringent, not definitely not as much as what is currently in India. In fact, if it can, in countries where they don't have tax treaties with India, probably these free trade agreements can be used to ensure that the profits earned by the Indian businesses in those countries are not taxed, since they would probably be taxed here, unless of course they are companies incorporated and in African countries, then they may not get taxed. But all of that depends on how the Indian government negotiates this free trade agreement or trade deals with these individual countries, as well as with the African continental free trade area, that is the African Union. It has to be these free trade deals now have to be very shrewdly negotiated by the government, and therein lies the future of India's cross-border trade. And I believe, I mean, with these kind of points, I'm sure the Indian government also is thinking on these lines. And the three pillars that the Indian government should keep in mind is that the financial sector has to be very thoroughly developed in Africa, and education levels should rise. So education also should be something which should be made easily available by the government to people in Africa. And the African countries should have strong governance structures. So if a need arises for partnership with the Indian government to create those governance structures, the government of India should enable that. So it should have an enabling framework for the African country governments to have that kind of governance structures. So the government should really give it a serious thought and should make all these points actionable. And I'm sure, because the economy is not going to turn around just like that, but if these all steps are taken, then I'm sure that you need not look back. It will be, the future will be a completely different and a great future for Indian businesses as well as for Africa. And probably, uh, I mean, Africa will really welcome Indian businesses like never before if the steps are taken in the right direction. If you like this episode, please put a like on the video. If you want to get more videos on such topics, then subscribe to my uh, account, press on the bell icon. And if I get more than 1,000 views for this video and 100 likes, then I am very positive to make more videos on individual country related investments in Africa. But that I'll wait and see how much you like my videos. Thank you so much for uh, uh, I mean uh, being with me throughout this video. and see you soon. Bye friends.